Okay, let's have another go. We're recording. Okay, take two, first take. 5 minutes in, and some twat in a biplane flies straight overhead. So I'm back. Been off for Christmas and New Year, and not been very well, quite frankly. Laid in bed, shivering, sweating. You know the kind of thing. But back to health now. And I wanted to tie up that brewing series, and probably not a better day to be outside doing a bit of filming. The view only marred by the giant trampoline of my son's that gets about as much use as I thought it would, but let's keep my domestic grievances out of this video. I wanted to tie up the brewing series. If you watch the other two videos, the first video was about beer appreciation really, and why now is, in my view, possibly the best time that there's maybe ever been for appreciating beer. You can get styles from around the world. The second one was showing you the brewing process. I brewed me actually, a Belgian double, but you got to see all the process there, brewing it from the raw crushed malt and the hops and the other adjuncts that go into that particular brew. What I want to do today is, what I didn't show you is how you would normally dispense a beer. So I want to show you my setup, how I keep it, how I dispense it. I've got some taps set up in the house, so I'm going to show you that. For anybody who's interested in taking up home brewing, this will be of use, I think. But also if you're just interested in the whole business of how beer is served and some of the sort of intricacies of the pressures, actually, because it's not just simply a case of connecting it up, pouring the tap, and out it comes. When you've got something that's under pressure and has got carbon dioxide in solution within it, then it's a little bit more complicated than that. So that's the second thing. And the third thing that I want to talk about is I want to talk about crafts and craft hobbies, and maybe I should mention that first because this is something that I feel a little bit passionate about. Home brewing is just one example of this, but it seems to me that people still have hobbies today, but craft hobbies, I think, have started to become seen as a little bit naff, a little bit passé, a bit bizarre in some ways. In terms of brewing, if you went back to the 80s, there was only about 400 breweries left in the UK, and now there are around 4,500 breweries. In fact, it's believed there's probably more commercial breweries in the UK than there has been at any time in history. And a lot of those are artisan, small concerns, craft breweries, producing a bewildering array of beers, trying to bring back old styles, creating new styles, and yet at the same time craft hobbies are being seen as a little bit passé and naff, and I have to commend them. There's nothing wrong with hobbies like reading, playing video games, watching videos on YouTube, right, and they're all things that I do. But I don't think that you can beat a hobby where you actually create something that you can appreciate, that other people can appreciate at the end of it, that you have an end product, that you produce something. And so I'd commend that to people if you don't have something like that in your life. And brewing is just one example. If you get a taste for that, watch my first video on brewing where you can see the process and you'll get some tips from that. What I want to show you is just how you can dispense beer and just the kind of setup that you can have. So what I'm going to do is go into the garage and show you the setup that I've got here. Okay, so here we are in the garage where all the magic takes place, and I'm going to try and film and show you my setup here and just show you what you can achieve. It's a little bit difficult here. I'm a little bit sort of hemmed in because of this sofa set that my sister-in-law has purchased second-hand and we are having to store for her at the moment. It means that I can't actually brew any beer at the moment because I haven't got any space. But anyway, let's keep domestic grievances out of this video once again. So what I want to do is show you this setup. But the first thing you need to think about is the fact that obviously you've got to put your beer in something. We brewed this Belgian double the other day, did we not? Yes, we did. And that is in these bottles. But it's a right old faff bottling beer, and if you decide to brew your own beer and you put it all in bottles, you'll soon get a little bit pissed off with it. Mark my words. Much better to put it in kegs. One of these kegs holds 19 litres, which is 5 US gallons or 4.5 proper imperial gallons, ladies and gentlemen. And these are wonderful. The phrase lasts a lifetime is overused. These won't last a lifetime. These will last multiple lifetimes. In actual fact, they're remarkably cheap, I think, for what they are. You can buy them new now. I've got a new one over here, in fact. £70 for a brand new, made in Italy, Cornelius keg. That's what they're called. And because they're kind of made to a standard, all the fittings on them, you can get replacement O-rings and washers and all this kind of thing. Very, very easy to clean in the homebrew environment because they have this big lid. These were originally made, these designs, for holding things like cola concentrates. And if you look inside there, you can probably see there's a scavenger tube. It's not that clear, but there's a scavenger tube that goes almost all the way to the bottom. This is one that needs cleaning, by the way, this one. But that scavenger tube goes all the way to the bottom. So effectively what you have is you have a carbon dioxide input, which just puts the carbon dioxide at the top, and then the liquid out comes from the tube at the bottom, so that the gas pressure in the top pushes the beer out. One of those holds about 19 litres, so that's the equivalent of these 500 milliliter bottles, 38 of those. You can clean one of those, or you can clean 38 of those. It's a bit of a no-brainer. And you can see I've got a couple attached here. Maybe I should show you what's going on here. So obviously what you need is some method of keeping your beer cool so it lasts longer, and also so it's at a reasonable temperature to serve. And this is possibly about the best way that you can do it nowadays, which is to buy an old freezer. I've gone for a large commercial chest freezer because it allows me to have those beers like that. I can put the bottles in there. I can put bottles of wine and stuff like that. It's the end of Christmas, so all the wine's been drunk at the moment. And I can even ferment lager in there. I can have a little thing with a fermenter with some lager in there, which I did a while ago. So I bought this commercial freezer second hand, obviously at about a fifth the price that it would have been new, with a reconditioned condenser, I think it's called, a brand new condenser actually, all the thing reconditioned. One thing, if you buy one of these things, unlike a fridge which tends to have a cooling shelf, a freezer cools via the sides. The pipes are actually in the sides. Whatever you do, don't drill a fucking hole through the side of your freezer. Right, you will regret it, because you could drill through those pipes. Dead easy. Just get a bit of, I think this is 1.5 by 3 inch timber. I just made a frame up there, and then get a load of silicone sealant, wodge it round, unscrew the lid, obviously, from the back, lay the lid on the top, so that sits on the silicone sealant, put a few weights on there, a few things just to weight it down a bit, and then give it 24 hours, and this will seal in position, and then rescrew the hinges back into the position. And not only have you just increased the height and your capacity a little bit, but you now have effectively like a little surround that you can drill your holes through there. So that's the setup. Everything I've done here I've done since September, so this is not like a major operation that's going to take you ages to do. CO2, this is how it works then. So we've got CO2 cylinder that goes to a regulator which gives you two pressures there. That's showing 20, normally shows about 18, which is what I want that one at. That is my lager gas line, and then this other one's at about 12 for other kinds of ales. And then those outputs come out of there. The 12 psi one comes to this manifold, so I've got different gas lines because sometimes you'll need to pressurize more than one keg at once. And then there's my lager line, because I only ever have one keg of lager at once. So that's the gas coming in, and then you've got the beer lines coming out. And actually where the beer line's coming out is where it starts to get a little bit interesting. So let me try and explain what happens here. So what happens is the CO2 pressure sits on top of the beer, and gradually that gets absorbed into the beer, and that's what carbonates your beer. Okay, that's what gives it a bit of fizz, that gives it a bit of life. And also because carbon dioxide in solution, I think it forms carbonic acid, it gives it a little bit of bite, a little bit of a different taste to it. And actually, if you carbonate beers more heavily, it does alter their taste. So that gradually gets absorbed, but you need to keep that top pressure as well, because the top pressure is what pushes the beer out the pipe. Okay, so that needs to be in some kind of balance. Now, the problem is this, is that whereas, for example, 12 to 18 psi are great pressures for carbonating your beer, they're a little bit more than you'd want to serve it, because when you open the tap, what you'll get out is a load of foam coming out the other end. Because what happens is the beer gets pushed out of here, it's getting agitated all the way down the pipe, it's getting agitated as it comes out the tap, right? It's getting messed about, and that makes the CO2 want to come out of solution, and you've got a massive drop in pressure. It's dropped from an overpressure of 14 psi or whatever, 15 psi, down to no overpressure, down to atmospheric pressure. So you've got that drop in pressure, and you can end up with a glass of foam very, very easily. Now, one of the ways in which most pubs solve this is that the cellar is a floor down, of course. So actually just lifting the beer up gets rid of a lot of that pressure. You can't do that in this environment. I dispense the other side of this wall, my garage wall. My garage attaches to my house. The other side of that wall is the utility room, which I'll show you in a bit. I'll show you the beer taps. I'll pull a beer off so that you can see. But I need to lose the pressure another way. Now, this has been a little bit of a learning experience for me. The first thing that I did was I bought these things, which are a controllable outlet valve. They've got a sort of pin valve on a spring that pushes back and restricts the flow coming out so that it would take some of the pressure out. So I tried using these, and then it came out through this 3/8 line, and the 3/8 line ran all the way, and it didn't work. I either got a lot of foam or I got virtually no flow. It would take about 4 minutes to fill a pint glass and you'd still get foam. So that was a little bit dispiriting. So what I knew was that rather than use the 3/8 line, if you use this tiny little 3/16 line, this has about 10 times as much, when beer is flowing, about 10 times as much resistance, because it's so narrow, because it's so restrictive, as the 3/8 line, and that will absorb a lot of the pressure. The pressure at the other end will be significantly lower. I think something like about 2 psi per foot of line that drops, or 1.5 psi maybe it is per foot of line that stuff drops. So what I did was I terminated this here and then had a coil of about 6 foot of this stuff, and then the coil then connected back onto the 3/8, and then the 3/8 ran all the way through into where you'll see at the utility room. And I thought, well, that will do it. That will nicely, gently dissipate the pressure, and it'll just flow out the other end. It was crap. It made it even worse. It flowed out slower, but it was still full of foam. You get about a second of liquid beer, then a second of foam, then a second of liquid beer, then a second of foam. It was worse than useless. And I've got my head around why that is now. And this is I find this a little bit interesting as to how this works. So I think really what is going on here is that yes, you want to drop the pressure, but what you don't want to do is to drop all the pressure, right? So all of a sudden the beer would end up here. You can see now this passes inside that, but it didn't. It terminated, and then the beer transferred into this line. So what would happen at this point is that the beer would have dropped a lot of the pressure, okay, but then all of a sudden it goes from going through a hose that is providing some back pressure into another hose, into a much wider internal diameter hose, where all of a sudden there's no resistance to the other side of it whatsoever, but it's still getting agitated as it goes through the hose. So it's now effectively, all the time it's in this hose now, it's at normal atmospheric pressure, okay? And because it's at normal atmospheric pressure, it's starting to gas off. It's starting to produce those same bubbles that your beer produces in the pint glass when it's at normal atmospheric pressure. And so because it's being agitated as it's going down that line, it's now producing bubbles all the time it's going down that line. So it's got like 6 or 7 foot of that line to get to the other end, being agitated all the time. And so by the time it gets to the tap, you just got a shitload of froth. So what I realized was, and this is something that I have never seen in any homebrew guide, the problem with this little thin pipe is that it's really fragile, right? And quite honestly, I would not want that little thin pipe passing through my wall with no protection, which is effectively the situation that it would be at. But it turns out, this is the bit that that I hadn't read anywhere, I just found out for myself, that the 3/16 pipe will happily thread within the 3/8. So you can use a 3/8 beer line as a sort of protected shield for your 3/16 pipe. And so that is the setup that I have now. So effectively what happens now is the 3/16 pipe, rather than being coiled up here and then connecting to 7 foot of 3/8 pipe, it now runs through the 3/8 pipe. And so the 3/16 pipe runs almost all the way to the tap. There's only about a foot of the larger pipe at the other end. Okay, so what I'll do now is then, let me show you how this works. I'll take this to the other end, I'll pour a beer, and you'll get some idea of how well this works. Okay, so here we are inside in Maison Plum, and you can see what we've been doing in here. This is the other side of the operation, and you can see this is effectively a utility room. Okay, but we're trying to make it a little bit of a home bar as well. The optics were my wife's idea, but a damn good idea, I think. So we're going to have some crap on the walls as well to make it a little bit bar-like. We've got sort of liqueurs and stuff up there. And then with the snacks in the background, this is the business part as far as I'm concerned, because here we have the faucets, the taps that the beer comes out of. We've got an American IPA at the moment on that line, and a lager on that one. And if I show you down here, let me see if I can show you. I brought a little torch in with me, so maybe I can show you what's going on under here. If I get that under there, you can see there the lines coming out of the wall and running up like that. So that's the setup that I've got. So what I'm going to do is, I think the last thing I should do, I should just show you this working, shouldn't I? I think that would be right. And what I wanted to show you, just to add a little bit of interest. One thing you will note if you buy a lager in a pub is that it's a lot fizzier, isn't it? It always seems to be a lot fizzier. Part of that is because they tend to be carbonated a little bit more, but part of it is a load of billy bullshit. And that's because beer glasses for other beers tend to just have a nice bottom to them, okay, with no etchings, whereas a lager glass here is a Stella glass. Can you see that little star at the bottom? That's etched on the bottom to try and give some sort of nucleation sites for the CO2 to form, and to form a load of bubbles and make it all look a lot fizzier and prettier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour some lager into here, and then I'm going to pour some lager into there, and let's put ourselves a little bit of a backdrop there. We'll have a look, shall we? We'll compare the two things, and you'll notice a hell of a difference. Okay, have a look. So let's pour these beers. So if we pour this one first, I'm going to have to try and do this all one-handed, which will probably be easier with this glass than it will with the other glass. But let's pour that in there. See how lovely it looks? It's come out really, really nice, this beer. Never made a lager before this one, and it's a very, very different process. So I was really kind of pleased with how that came out. I won't do it to the top, because otherwise I'm going to end up getting it all over my hand. And let's pour some in here as well now. Yeah, you have to hold it down. You have to hold the fermentation temperature down at about 10 Celsius. That's about 50 Fahrenheit. And then you have to have this lagering process afterwards. You have to raise the temperature to get rid of the diacetyl, which gives it a buttery taste, and lower it again. You can already see, look at how the beer's going wild in this glass compared to the other glass. Always note that when you buy a lager, always have a note of that. And if you look at how the beers look in here, look at the difference. Maybe if I put the torch on, let's get the torch on, and you'll see, look, you can see a nice little bead coming up there. And you can see it's going absolutely ballistic. Maybe I can do that from behind, we'll get an even better sort of view there. It's a bit of a harsh light, that, isn't it? It's horrible. No, it's not really working very well. Let's do it from the side. Yeah, the side's nice. The side's nice. That's good. I'll set that up over there. You can see the difference there, can't you? It looks really flat there. You bought that in a bar, you'd think this lager's shite. It's not been gassed properly. And you bought that, you'd think, whoa, that's going ballistic, that. It's the glass that makes all the difference. So that's it, yeah, that's the lager. And that's all it takes. And you can see here, it looks a bit nicer in here. It looked a bit cloudy in there. It's not, it's absolutely crystal clear. and it tastes absolutely gorgeous, as does the American IPA. So there you go. Okay, so that's the end of the video, but something to think on. All of that you've seen has been set up since September, including the brewing of the beers. So it's not a major operation really, and you could have something like this quite easily. Obviously, you'd have to configure it to your house. If you haven't got a garage attached, then you might need to incorporate the freezer stroke chiller within your actual house, and then have the taps attached to the top of it, for example, is one thing that some people do. But it's well within the grasp of anybody to do that. Just a little bit of reading, a little bit of research, and you can do that. So I'd commend that. If these videos that I've made just encouraged a couple of people to take up brewing and maybe make a setup, that would be good. But something more than that, if it would just encourage people to maybe consider craft hobbies more generally and find something that is a passion of theirs and think, you know what, rather than just doing these more passive hobbies, doing something that has an end product at the end of it, well, that would be something that would be quite gratifying to think if it did that. Okay, that's it. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Back to some slightly more usual fare before the month is out. Bye for now.